Being behind the DM screen is always a balancing act, and it can be easy to get overwhelmed. But it's important to remember that at the end of the day, you and your players are there to have a good time, and as the DM, you're the host of the party. Hey everyone, I'm Miles Duffield, aka GM Miles, aka DM Daddy, aka Miles Away From, and I'm a professional dungeon master with 15 years of experience under my belt. And I'm here today to share with you a couple tips. Well, maybe I'd call them tricks. Yeah, tricks that I use at my table to fool my players into having an even better time. We're getting sneaky in the nicest way today. Roll the intro. Let's go. I'm excited. So I'm gonna be honest, most of these, well, a few of these are simple things that a lot of GMs do, and probably without even realizing it. Some of them you might read and say, oh dang, I already do that. But the awareness that you're gonna get from realizing that you're doing a specific thing is gonna help you be able to experiment and test and even just use it instead of being a victim of your technique. Awareness is the key to a great game always. Awareness of your players, awareness of your material, awareness of your world, awareness of the system. I mean, I could go on, right? I will say that some of these are very reliant on white lies that we tell from behind the screen. So if you're a bad liar, some of these might not be for you. And also, if you're opposed to fudging rolls or anything behind the screen, then some of these are also not for you. But I will save those for last. Before you go anywhere, these are little ways to guide the tension, the drama, and the energy at the table, just to have more fun. Just to have more fun. That's where we're at. It's just to have more fun. Number one, hype the importance of critical successes and critical failures. There is nothing quite as immediately exciting in Dungeons & Dragons as the number 1 and the number 20. They spell doom and victory with very few digits. Now you can capitalize on this at your table with the way that you manage these. Now first up, if you roll a natural 20 or a natural 1 behind the screen, don't be afraid to put your head in your hands, to shout excitedly, to suck air through your teeth. That, right? Could that move? To look menacingly at your players, dead in the eyes. I mean, your reactions guide the way that your players view the world. You are their window into the game, so be sure that you give them information at every turn, especially in how you tell the story of the dice, especially when it happens behind this screen. They have no sense of what that is, and they don't really know what the numbers mean, most of them, especially if you're playing with new players. They're gonna gauge that off of how you respond to it. So you'll find your voice in this, and I also find that the tone of the game guides how you act out this tip immensely. That's exactly it. Don't be afraid to act it out. I do a lot more with critical successes and failures personally at my table to make them feel more important, give them more weight, but I might do a video on that later. Tell me if you're curious in the comments. So number 2 is play into and out of the story of player versus GM. So the age-old tale of player versus DM is honestly one that I don't like very much. I firmly believe that, as Matt Colville says, my job as a DM is to create and build tension, and then to resolve it. D&D at my table is not competitive. It's not a competitive game. I never end up shooting for a total party kill or TPK where everyone dies and the monsters or evildoers are victorious. That's not the story I want to tell. To me, a TPK at my table is a failure as a DM. And there are ways to recover from that, but it's never my goal to make players fail. However, a bunch of the fun of D&D for many players is succeeding against great odds, conquering an enemy and emerging victorious when failure seemed like the only option. That's a cool story and a fun one. And when you as a player are staring your friend, the dungeon master, in the face, and you know that they control all the monsters and creatures and world that is trying to destroy everything that your character holds dear, it can be hard not to get a little competitive. And competition is fun, but it can go too far. This trick can backfire like all the rest, and it requires a balance. And like all the things I do in D&D, and that I think you do in D&D too, it requires listening. Now, let's get into the meat of the trick. There are 2 personas that I adopt behind the screen as a GM. There's many more personas, but we're gonna talk about 2. One of these personas is that of the DM who is out to get you, who knows your fate and has it all planned. I have a white cat in my lap, steepled fingers, I control the world, and if you're nice to me, you might live through it. This is, of course, a facade. I don't know what's actually going to happen. I really want my players to foil me. I really want them to undercut my plans and find some interesting solution to the problems that I present, but give them the face of adversity that they can then outdo, that they can outwit. Present problems that you don't necessarily have a solution for, and when they find their own unique way to solve the complication, you have two options. Celebrate with them, super fun, super awesome, very bonding, or you can rue the day that those meddling kids messed up your evil plan. It's very Scooby-Doo, right? It's exciting. It helps them feel like they outwitted the all-knowing and the all-powerful. Now, the other persona I adopt is the flip side of the evil villain. I adopt a sort of fairy godmother stance. I'm worried about the players. I want to warn them of the danger ahead, or I want to laud them for their great successes. I'm on their side. After all, we're all in this together to tell the story of how your players defeated the great evil. Do I take it easy on them during gameplay? No! God, no. I'm merely here to help the players feel less alone. My job is always to create and heighten tension. This is just another tactic. When do I use each of these? When do I bring these out of the box? At what times do they fly out? Do they fly out? And start assaulting my players or coddling them. So here's where the listening comes in. If your players are feeling weak, vulnerable, scared, don't be a bully and play the evil genius. Nurture them. Play Galadriel and give them a useless shake and glow stick of faith and care. The Heaven Star, which is totally useless. Hopefully you haven't prepared a campaign that will actually murder your players. Hey, that's definitely a way to play games, and I love games that play like that. I don't find that D&D works the best like that. You do you. But when they are feeling confident, when they're feeling excited and ready to take on the world, then you can sit back and get fluffy on your lap and become the manifestation of the great evils in the campaign. Invite them in to come take you on. So just like you play ally and foe in the game, you can play at being ally and foe behind the screen as well. It's just another layer. And I find that this tricks players into getting more and more into the game. We all know how to compete. Number 3 is say yes and to players' requests. Let's be real. Players have some crazy ideas, and they ask weird things of you, and we all have one or two players who, well, they want things that will literally break the game. The toughest thing about that kind of player is that when they get what they want, they don't enjoy the game anymore. They enjoy the challenge of breaking and molding and shifting the game to their whim. But here's the thing, saying no is generally not fun. And while there are some things that need a clear no, there's a unique kind of fun in saying yes, but giving it a twist. So your player wants to create a magic item, a magic sword, let's say. Now there are rules for that, sure, and they require X amount of gold and X amount of time and a bunch of boring numbers. They're boring to me, they might not be boring to you. But what if the steel for the magic sword or the ruby gem in the pommel, what if those weren't easily accessible? What if you had to go somewhere and talk to somebody and take a quest and do something special to get the stuff needed to create this item that's going to be with the player forever? Now you've made a quest, you've made extra content out of a player's request, and you've made them feel like they're in the world, and now they're going to have a story attached to this thing that before would have just been a line on their character sheet. This is a great way to say yes to the dress. Honestly, I hope your characters are commissioning lots of magical dresses in your campaign, but also get more weight, get more exploration, more fun trouble, and get more meaning out of an item. Now, there are simpler requests, and a lot of these, for me, happen in battle or during skill checks. A player will say, I want to leap down like Link onto this enemy below me, and I want to stab my sword through his head and crumple him like a broken pogo stick. You would be surprised how often I get that request. It's like once a campaign, at least. Rule of cool applies. Absolutely, you can do that. But let's add a couple twists. Let's maybe punish them with some amazing silliness if they fail. So rule of cool is a term that's used pretty loosely to say that if it's awesome, then why not? But there are some places where rule of cool breaks down, and this helps temper it. So another example, a player wants to stab the enemy in the leg so that they can't run as fast. Great thought, cool, interesting thought. They're thinking in a way that works in games often, but there's no mechanic for that. There's no mechanic in D&D for called shots, not in 5e. You can't just say no. If you say no to that to a new player especially, you're just gonna disappoint them. You're gonna take away a bit of their agency, and they're gonna have this feeling D&D isn't the big, you can do anything wild world that we all want it to be. How do we fix this? Well, you can make up a mechanic just to see how it goes. Maybe say, okay, you can hit them, but the AC is gonna be higher. Typical called shot mechanic. Okay, you can try to hit them, but you're gonna have to make a save to not be pulled down with them if you succeed. Also, be clear that you're making up a rule, right? Well, there's not a rule for that, but why don't we do it this way this time? So if you get confronted later, if you've broken the game with a rule that you made up in the moment, you can say, well, y'all, I did say that it was that time, and I think it kind of breaks the game. And then you can go back to the options for actions presented by the PHB, and it can become a conversation at the table about what rules you want to play by, which is always a helpful one to have. Now, some people will be down, some people will not, but the bottom line is no is always less fun than yes and. Maybe yes but would be a better way to present this tip, but that's less positive. So yes and. Say yes and. Number 4 is get excited with your players. Get excited for them. Be the excited, engaged player that you want to have. Now this one's remarkably easy, and it's something that a lot of us do really instinctively when our players celebrate. The human brain is designed with these neurons called mirror neurons. I'm no neurologist, but they allow you to very easily mimic the behavior of people around you. They're designed to help you do that, which is really important as a kid when you're developing, but it also affects us. So when someone yawns, we say that yawns are contagious because as soon as you see someone yawn, you want to yawn too, and that is mirror neurons firing, and you can use that too. You can get excited for magical items for your players, for their level ups, for their successes, their critical successes. Get pumped, get into it, and you will set the precedent of how excited your players can get at your table and make everything just more fun and more engaged. Lead by example. Be the player you want to see. Number 5, don't be afraid to bend the roles behind the screen to help tell a better story and have a more fun game. This is the big one. This is the one that starts fights at tables. This is the one that I'm sure that will get me screamed at in the comments section. It breaks internet forums. In order to avoid any of that, let's start with some truths. No one likes to be lied to. Nobody likes to be coddled. No one likes to feel like you helped them win. I'm sure someone would, but that's a very rare player. So when you flub or change a number behind the screen, you are breaking an inherent contract between you and your players. You expect them to be honest about their dice rolls and their characters' abilities. Why shouldn't you be expected to do that as well? I'll tell you why. And this is, of course, just my opinion. Play your way at your table, and I have perfect respect for the people who refuse to flub roles. But for me, we should not be held to the same standard as players because we have different jobs at the table. A player's job is to pursue their character's objective. It's to come up with interesting and fun tactics to pursue said objective. It's to manage their character sheets, and it's to have fun. Your job is much different. You have to manage those characters. You have to manage their players and their feelings. You have to manage all the obstacles and enemies. You have to manage the world, and you have to manage the rules. Your job is to make it difficult for them. Most importantly, for them to get what they want, to create that tension, and to help them tell the story of the table. And the story of most of my favorite tables is that it was difficult. The quest was tough. We struggled, and some of us may have not made it, but in the end, we succeeded. It's a good story. Now, I ask you, how can I do that if my monsters won't roll below a 15? Sometimes the dice betray you, for better or for worse, for high or for low. Sometimes true random feels like a disappointing and deadly pattern. As interesting as randomness can make this game, it can also kill the fun. I have seen combats drag drag on for hours because my players couldn't roll above a 6. I've seen BBEGs, the big bad evil guy, the main antagonists of our story arcs or our campaigns. I've seen them be eviscerated, torn to shreds in a single turn by 3 natural 20s rolled by a single player. And that has undercut months of build-up and robbed all of the other players of the satisfaction of getting to bleed their foe and succeed in the final battle, at least a little bit. I've seen the dice decide to pick on one player for an entire campaign. None of these things are fun. My job is to make sure that everyone is having fun. And if the dice get in my way, I'm going to find a way around them. So this tactic should be used sparingly. Do not control every roll. For randomness' sake, do not piss off RNGesus. Let the dice roll most of the time. Only employ this tactic when you feel or hear your players getting bored or overly frustrated. Use it to curb that powerless feeling that the dice can give you, and also use it to buff the challenge when your players are rolling too well. Similarly, there are ways around having to lie about dice rolls, and I've stolen my favorite of these tactics from Delta Green, which is a lovely Call of Cthulhu role-playing setting. Instead of setting dice classes or numbers that you have to roll, set skill ranks for checks. Lord of the Rings, the perfect example. What is the password to get into Moria?
What's the Elvish word for friend?
Well, Gandalf has to roll a 15. It's not that hard of a thing to remember. It's like a single Elvish word, right? But the player playing Gandalf rolls a 1. And they sit there for hours waiting. At the end of it, when he finally rolls, the DM has to throw a kraken in to make anything exciting at all. To heck with that. That's boring. That's terrible. That's not fun. Instead, Gandalf, you have a +6 in history? Yeah, sure. You know the password to this place. There's nothing more frustrating than a ranger with +6 in perception rolling 2 1s when trying to see an orc's camp that's only a click away in his favored terrain. It just kills a game. It makes a player feel unimportant, and I've seen it happen. So save yourself from the dice, but be careful and do it by listening to what your players need. Okay, we did it. There are 5 tips to trick your players into enjoying your game more. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already, and give this video a like. If you want to see something in particular, please comment. I'm always looking for ideas for videos, especially being fresh out the gate. I'm not really sure what to make just yet, so you can help me, and if you don't, I'm just gonna start doing stuff, and it'll be your fault when I go too far. There we go. Shuffling blame off my shoulders at every chance I get. If you have anything to say about any of these, please talk to me in the comments. Come hang out with me on stream at twitch.tv/geeksforgood every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Time, and some Wednesdays at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Time when I do World Building Wednesday, where I do something with D&D. I'd love to get some healthy discussion going on about these tips. Maybe we can come up with some even better tips together, and then I'll make another video about the better tips that the community came up with. Thank you so much for hanging out, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. How much of an underbite can I get? Mini underbite.